listeners, jumping right into it today, we're tackling a topic that hits close to home for you.
Yeah.
The impact of mass immigration and declining fertility rates on British civilization. We'll be looking at it all through the lens of men's rights and traditional societal structure.
Okay.
It's complicated stuff, but we'll break it down together using Conrad Riker's book, The End of Rome.
Ah, yes.
How mass immigration and declining fertility rates are killing British civilization.
Hence.
Vital, yeah. But this deep dive should help us unpack Riker's ideas, especially if you're trying to figure out and maybe even change those unspoken agreements, those covert contracts in your own relationship.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, one of the most interesting things about Riker's book is how he looks at history.
Okay.
He compares the fall of the Roman Empire to what's happening in Britain today. He argues that they're both facing some seriously similar problems,
Like what?
like mass immigration, a shrinking job market, and a loss of cultural identity.
So let's dig into that Roman Empire comparison. How does he see those factors playing out in modern Britain? Does he have any specific example?
Well, he brings up this statistic from the Migration Observatory at Oxford.
Okay.
It shows that the number of non-white residents in the UK has doubled in the last 2 decades. And he argues that this rapid change has put strain on social cohesion.
I see.
And it's contributed to native Britons feeling like they're losing their place, you know.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That definitely echoes some of the anxieties we see in the men's rights community.
Right.
Especially concerns about the changing culture and how it impacts traditional masculinity. But is there any proof to back up Riker's claim that mass immigration is directly linked to fewer job opportunities for British-born workers?
Well, Riker definitely argues that point, especially when it comes to the working class.
Okay.
He says mass immigration creates more competition for jobs and resources, leading to wages staying the same or even going down.
Right.
It's basically economic hardship. He uses the construction industry as a prime example because there are a lot of foreign workers in that sector.
I can see how that would worry men who are trying to be the traditional providers in their families.
Oh, absolutely.
If they're facing money problems, it could easily cause tension and conflict in their relationship.
For sure.
Could even affect those unspoken agreements, those covert contracts.
Yeah, those economic pressures can really mess with those unspoken agreements. But it's important to remember that not everyone agrees with Riker's view on the economic impact of mass immigration.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was a study by the National Institute of Economic and Social Research.
Okay.
And they actually found that mass immigration boosted the GDP by 0.63% between 1995 and 2011.
So it's a bit of a mixed bag then.
Yeah.
Some people say mass immigration helps the economy, while others, like Riker, say it hurts native workers.
It is a complex issue.
It seems like there's no easy answer.
No.
I guess it depends on how you balance the potential good and bad, right?
Exactly. And it's really important to look at all the different viewpoints and data before making up your mind.
Okay, so we've talked about immigration and its potential impact on the job market. But Riker also links mass immigration to changes in culture, especially the rise of what he calls radical feminism.
Yes.
Now, this is where things get especially interesting for our listeners, particularly those who are actively trying to deconstruct and understand those covert contracts in their own relationships.
Yeah. Riker's views on feminism are definitely controversial.
Oh, how so?
He says that radical feminism has made women less likely to have kids and more focused on their careers instead of family.
Okay.
He thinks this has led to fewer kids being born and what he calls a man drought. He even points to the total fertility rate in the UK.
What about it?
It's gone way down from 3.55 in the 1960s to only 1.7 in 2020.
Okay, so let's break this down a bit.
Sure.
First, what exactly does he mean by this man drought?
Well, he's saying that because fewer women are having kids, and because more women are financially independent and have different priorities, it's created a situation where there are fewer women who are available for marriage and traditional families.
Okay.
He thinks this has led to more competition for partners and a sense of scarcity among men, especially those looking for traditional relationships.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
I can see how that would resonate with some men in the red pill community.
Right.
Especially those who feel like the traditional dating world has changed in a way that puts them at a disadvantage. But is it fair to blame such a complex social issue solely on feminism?
Well,
I mean, couldn't economic factors or changing social values or even access to birth control also be playing a role in the declining birth rate?
you're right. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Riker's perspective is just one way of looking at a very complex issue.
Sure.
While he puts a lot of the blame on radical feminism,
Right.
other experts say there are many factors at play.
All right, so it's not as simple as just blaming feminism.
Definitely not.
But let's dig a little deeper into Riker's argument about radical feminism.
Okay.
How does he connect this to the broader changes he's seeing in society?
Right.
And how does all of this tie into those covert contracts that our listeners are so interested in understanding?
Riker says that radical feminism has changed traditional gender roles and expectations, and this has created confusion and uncertainty for both men and women.
Interesting.
He believes this shift has led to a breakdown in communication and understanding within relationships, making it harder to navigate those unspoken agreements and expectations.
So he's basically saying that the rules of the game have changed, but nobody really knows what the new rules are.
That's a good way to put it.
And this is causing friction and misunderstandings in relationships.
Exactly. Riker says that those traditional covert contracts, those unspoken agreements about roles and responsibilities and expectations within relationships, are becoming harder and harder to uphold in a society where gender roles are constantly changing.
And this all directly connects to men's rights.
Yes.
Because Riker is essentially arguing that men are being left behind in this cultural shift. He suggests that the traditional masculine traits and behaviors that were once valued are now seen as bad, leaving many men feeling lost and unsure of where they fit in.
Exactly. And he argues that this feeling of being left out is made even worse by the influx of different cultures with different values and gender roles. It just adds another layer of complexity to the already complicated world of modern relationships.
So we've got mass immigration potentially affecting the job market. We've got declining birth rates leading to this idea of a man drought. And we've got radical feminism changing gender roles and expectations. That's a lot to process.
It is.
And we haven't even touched on his critique of cultural relativism and multiculturalism.
We'll get there.
But before we move on, I want to pause for a second and ask you, our listeners, to think about what we've talked about so far.
Yeah, take a moment.
How do these trends relate to your own experience? Have you noticed similar changes in your own lives and relationships?
It's really important to connect these big societal trends to your own personal reality. Take some time to consider how these forces might be affecting your own interactions and relationships.
We'll be back in a moment to continue this discussion, and we'll delve deeper into Riker's critiques of cultural relativism.
I'm looking forward to it.
And how he sees it contributing to the decline of British identity. So stay tuned.
Stay with us. Welcome back. So before the break, we were talking about how Riker connects mass immigration to worries about the economy and changing gender roles, especially the rise of what he calls radical feminism. Now, he also digs into another controversial topic, the impact of cultural relativism and multiculturalism on British society.
This is definitely something that a lot of our listeners have strong opinions about, especially those in the red pill community. There's often this feeling that traditional values and a sense of shared identity are being eroded because there's too much emphasis on tolerance and diversity.
Riker definitely taps into that feeling.
Does he?
Yeah, he's really critical of what he calls the cult of cultural relativism. He says it's created a situation where you can't even question the impact of mass immigration on British culture.
Oh, wow.
He argues that political correctness has shut down open discussion about these things. It's preventing people from talking about their legitimate concerns about preserving British identity.
So basically, he's saying that people are afraid to speak up because they don't want to be labeled as racist or intolerant if they have any doubts about how fast culture is changing. And I can see how this would be really frustrating, especially for men who are already feeling lost because of the other societal changes we've been talking about.
It's like adding insult to injury. Riker argues that this silencing of dissenting voices has created resentment and alienation among those who feel like their values and their way of life are being ignored.
But let's look at this from a different perspective. Isn't there something to be said for embracing diversity and learning from other cultures?
Sure.
Doesn't a multicultural society offer a wider range of perspectives and experiences?
I mean, it could.
Which could actually enrich everyone's lives.
Riker does say that diversity can have its benefits, but he insists that it needs to be balanced with a strong sense of shared identity and values.
So it's about finding that middle ground.
Yeah, he thinks that without this foundation of shared culture, a society could break down into competing groups, leading to social unrest and a lack of unity.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
It sounds like he's saying that a certain level of cultural similarity is necessary for a society to work well. But how does he define British culture?
That's a good question.
In a country with such a long and complex history of immigration and cultural exchange, is there even such a thing as a single British identity that needs to be preserved?
That's something Riker tries to grapple with in his book.
Does he?
He admits that it's hard to define national identity in a multicultural society. But he still thinks that certain core values and traditions are essential to being British.
Oh, like what?
Things like the rule of law, individual liberty, and a shared history.
He sees those as the defining characteristics of British culture.
Yeah, he's not necessarily advocating for going back to some idealized past where everyone was the same. But he does want people to reaffirm these core values as a way to bring society together, especially when things are changing so quickly.
And I imagine this ties back to his worries about mass immigration.
It does.
Because he probably sees it as a threat to preserving these core values.
Exactly. Riker argues that mass immigration, especially from cultures with very different values and traditions, can wear away at these core principles over time.
I see.
He says that without some level of cultural assimilation, a society risks losing its shared identity and splitting apart along cultural lines.
And again, this connects back to the red pill philosophy.
It does.
Which emphasizes understanding the differences between masculine and feminine energies and how those dynamics play out in relationships and in society.
Right. Riker sees the fading of traditional gender roles as part of this bigger cultural shift. He thinks that the lines between genders are becoming blurred, and that the influx of cultures with different gender norms is adding to the confusion and anxiety, especially for men who are trying to figure out their place in all of this.
So that brings up a really important question.
What's that?
If society is really going through these huge cultural and demographic changes, how can men adapt and thrive in this new reality? Does Riker offer any solutions or strategies for dealing with these challenges?
He does.
Okay, what are they?
He suggests a multi-pronged approach. It includes stricter border control, pro-natal policies to encourage more native births.
I see.
And investment in industries that create jobs for British citizens.
So he's looking for solutions on multiple levels.
Yeah, he sees these measures as essential for restoring a sense of national identity and economic security, which he thinks are crucial for men to feel like they belong and have a purpose.
Okay, let's break these solutions down one by one.
Sure.
First, stricter border control. This is a really sensitive topic.
It is.
And it often leads to accusations of racism or xenophobia.
That's true.
How does Riker address those concerns?
Riker says that worries about border control aren't about keeping people out based on race or religion, but about protecting national sovereignty and making sure that current citizens are taken care of. He argues that a nation has the right to control its border and decide who can come in and live there.
So his argument is based on the idea that a nation, just like an individual, has the right to self-determination.
Exactly.
And that this right includes being able to regulate immigration to make sure it's in the best interest of its citizens.
That's right. Riker believes that unchecked immigration can be harmful, both for the native population and for the migrants themselves.
In what way?
He says it can cause cultural clashes, put a strain on social services, and create tension over resources and jobs.
And this ties back to his worries about British identity being eroded.
It does.
Because he probably sees uncontrolled immigration as a threat to preserving that shared culture.
Exactly. He says that a nation needs to manage immigration carefully to make sure that newcomers can fit into the existing society and contribute to its overall well-being.
Okay, so that's his stance on border control. What about his idea for pro-natal policy?
Yeah.
What exactly does he have in mind?
He suggests a mix of things. Financial incentives like tax breaks or child allowances, along with cultural shifts that promote the importance of family life. He believes that encouraging native births is key to dealing with the declining fertility rate and ensuring the long-term survival of British society.
That seems to fit with the traditional values that the red pill community often talks about. Which emphasizes the importance of family and passing on traditions to future generations.
Exactly. But these policies might face pushback from people who support individual choice and reproductive freedom.
That's true.
Riker knows that his views on pro-natal policies will probably be controversial. He expects to hear from people who see these measures as the government interfering in personal decisions.
I can see that.
But he argues that the declining birth rate is a serious threat to the nation. And that strong measures are needed to address this demographic crisis.
So he's basically saying that the right of an individual to choose whether or not to have children needs to be balanced against the need to make sure the nation survives and flourishes.
Yeah, that's a good way to sum up his position. He sees the declining birth rate as a sign of a bigger problem.
Oh, like what?
A lack of faith in the future and a decline in the values that once supported strong families and communities.
Okay, so we've covered border control and pro-natal policy. Now, what about his suggestion to invest in industries that create jobs for British citizens? What specific industries does he have in mind?
Riker doesn't get into specifics about particular industry,
Okay.
but he emphasizes the need to create opportunity so British citizens can succeed and provide for their families.
Right.
He argues that globalization and automation have gotten rid of a lot of traditional jobs, leaving many people feeling economically insecure.
And this plays into those anxieties that many men feel about being providers.
It does.
If they're having trouble finding stable, well-paying jobs,
Right.
it can affect their self-esteem and cause tension in their relationship.
Exactly. Riker sees economic security as a crucial part of individual well-being and social stability.
Okay.
He thinks that when people can support themselves and their families, they're more likely to have a sense of purpose.
Feel like they belong.
And make positive contributions to society. So his solutions were all focused on creating conditions that help men succeed and fulfill their traditional roles.
That's right.
He sees stricter border control pronatal policies and economic empowerment as essential for bringing back a sense of stability and purpose in a world that feels increasingly chaotic and uncertain.
That's a good way to summarize his overall approach.
Okay.
He believes these measures are necessary to tackle the root causes of the anxieties and frustrations that many men are experiencing and to build a society where they feel valued and respected again.
Riker's proposals are definitely interesting.
They are. And they offer a way to understand some of the concerns we hear from the Red Pill community.
Yeah.
But they also raise a lot of questions. Are his solutions realistic? Are they ethical? And most importantly, do they really work?
Good question.
Can they address the complex challenges that men are facing in the 21st century?
Those are all important questions.
Yeah.
And in the end, each person has to wrestle with them and come to their own conclusion.
Right.
What matters is that we engage with these ideas critically, consider the different viewpoints, and try to find solutions that are both fair and practical.
Absolutely. And as you continue to think about Riker's ideas,
Yeah.
I encourage you to think about how they relate to your own experience
Right.
and to the broader discussions happening in the Red Pill community. How do his arguments resonate with the challenges you see men facing?
It's about making it personal.
Yeah. And what insights can you take from his analysis
Right.
to help you navigate those challenges in your own lives and relationships?
Remember, the point isn't just to absorb information, but to use it to make positive changes in your own life and in the world around you.
And we'll continue exploring these ideas in just a bit.
Looking forward to it.
We'll be diving into Riker's analysis of how technology is impacting both mass immigration and cultural change.
Sounds fascinating.
So stick with us. Okay, we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into Conrad Riker's The End of Rome.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground,
Yeah.
from mass immigration and declining fertility rates to the rise of radical feminism and the erosion of traditional values.
Lots to think about.
And we even explored Riker's proposed solutions, which, let's be honest, are pretty bold.
Yeah.
They'll probably get people talking.
Definitely.
And throughout our discussion, we've tried to connect these big societal trends
Right.
to the specific interests and concerns of you, our listeners,
Exactly.
especially those of you who are active in the Red Pill community and who are trying to understand and maybe even change those covert contracts in your own relationship.
That's right.
Because even though Riker focuses on the big picture stuff, like government policy, cultural shifts, demographic trends,
Macro level.
right? We know that these forces ultimately affect individuals,
They do.
shaping their experiences, their relationships, and their sense of self.
Absolutely. And there's one final piece of the puzzle that Riker explores that we need to talk about.
What's that?
The role of technology in speeding up these societal changes.
Okay, so how does he link technology into all of this?
Well, Riker argues that technology is kind of a double-edged sword.
How so?
On one hand, it's made it easier for people to move to Britain and find work. Think online job platforms, language learning apps.
Right.
But on the other hand, he suggests that technology is also contributing to the spread of global culture,
I see.
which can further erode national identities and traditional values.
So it's like technology's breaking down borders
It is.
and creating a more connected world.
Yeah.
But in doing so, it's also blurring cultural lines and speeding up the rate of change.
Right. And that can be unsettling,
Yeah.
especially for those who feel like things are changing too fast.
Like the rug is being pulled out from under them.
Precisely. And Riker sees this rapid technological advancement as making the other trends we've discussed even worse.
Like what?
Like mass immigration, the decline of traditional communities,
Right.
the breakdown of social structure.
I see.
He suggests that technology can lead to isolation and alienation as people spend more time in the digital world and less time connecting with their physical surroundings and their community.
That makes me think about the Red Pill emphasis on building strong real-life community,
Right.
and rediscovering traditional masculine virtues.
Yeah, it seems like there's a recognition within that community that technology can be both a tool and a trap.
Right.
It's about using it wisely and prioritizing those real-world connections and experiences.
It's all about balance, right?
Exactly. Riker isn't saying we should completely reject,
Okay.
but he does want us to be aware of its potential downsides and to use it in a way that aligns with our values.
And promotes our well-being.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot with Riker.
We have.
Mass immigration, declining fertility rate, rise of radical feminism,
Right.
the erosion of traditional values, and the impact of technology.
That's been a lot.
It's been a whirlwind tour of some really complex and controversial ideas.
It has.
But before we wrap up, I want to go back to that question we asked at the beginning.
Okay.
How can understanding and changing those covert contracts in our relationships help us deal with these bigger societal challenges?
It's a question that Riker doesn't directly answer, but it's a crucial one for our listeners to think about.
Right, because while Riker focuses on the big picture stuff, we know that real change starts with
It does.
their relationships and their community. So how do we connect the dots?
That's the question.
How do we take these insights about mass immigration, feminism technology, and actually apply them to our own lives and relationships?
I think it starts with awareness.
Okay.
By understanding the forces that are shaping the world around us, we can start to see how they're playing out in our own interaction.
Right, and in the dynamics of our relationships.
For example, if Riker's right about the impact of radical feminism on gender roles, then it's really important to see how those changing expectations might be causing tension and misunderstandings in our own relationships.
And that's where the idea of the covert contract comes in.
Exactly.
By becoming more aware of those unspoken agreements, those unspoken expectations, we can start to have more open and honest conversations with our partner.
It's about communication.
About our needs and desires.
Absolutely.
We can start to build more balanced and fulfilling relationships.
Relationships that work.
Relationships that take into account the realities of the modern world.
It's about adapting.
Exactly. And by doing the work on a personal level, by building stronger relationships, by communicating better, by understanding and respecting each other's needs.
Those are the building blocks.
We can start to create positive changes.
Little ripple.
That spread out into our communities and society.
It starts with us.
So it's not just about reading Riker's book and saying, I agree or I disagree.
It's more than that.
It's about taking those insights and using them as a starting point for self-reflection, for dialogue,
For real conversation.
for action.
Taking action.
It's about realizing that we have the power to shape our own destinies.
We do.
Both as individuals and as a society.
It's empowering.
And for those of you who are ready to dive deeper into Riker's work and really explore his proposed solution, I encourage you to check out The End of Rome on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
It's a good read.
It's a challenging read.
It is.
But it will definitely make you think critically.
For sure.
And engage with these complex issues that are shaping our world.
It's worth the effort.
And remember, this is just the beginning. The journey doesn't end when the podcast is over.
It's a lifelong process.
This is just the start of a lifelong exploration.
Keep questioning, keep learning, keep growing, and keep striving to create a world that reflects your values and aspirations.
And until next time, fellow deep divers,
Keep diving deep.
keep diving deep.